Nobody expected the quiet girl to fight back, especially not like that. Not in front of everyone. But when Mason Braddock and Tanner Lowell cornered her outside the main building of Whitmore Academy, a prestigious prep school tucked into Connecticut's manicured hills, they thought they were in control. Rich, cocky, and emboldened by a lifetime without consequences, they pushed their luck one time, too many. And they picked the wrong girl. You don't belong here. That's what people whispered every time Samira Holt walked down the marble hallways of Whitmore. Every time she stepped into a classroom where no one looked like her, where her voice felt like it echoed just a bit too loudly. Whitmore wasn't just elite, it was exclusive in ways that went far deeper than grades or tuition fees. Mason and Tanner were the kings of the campus. Blonde, broad-shouldered, and brazenly cruel. Their fathers were both hedge fund giants who donated buildings and scholarships in exchange for power. Their sneers carried more weight than the faculty's rules. And on this particular afternoon, they were bored. Bored and ready to cause pain. Samira stood in front of them, the courtyard's gray stone reflecting the overcast sky above. Her deep brown skin caught the light, and her braids framed her face with quiet elegance. Her uniform was immaculate, just like everyone else's. But somehow, she was always treated like she didn't belong. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. Tanner tossed an empty energy drink can at her feet. "What's it like being the charity case, Holt?" he asked, voice dripping with mockery. Mason stepped closer, his tone colder. "Trailer park girl at a school for royals." "How did that happen?" Samira remained still. Her silence made them uncomfortable, but not enough to stop. They had no idea who she really was. No clue that her mother had survived 3 jobs at once to pay what the scholarship didn't. No clue that her father, Sergeant Major Roland Holt, had served 22 years in the Marines and raised her to stand her ground. No clue that she'd been training in Krav Maga since she was 9, spending her summers mastering every move not to fight, but to be ready. Because readiness was survival, and she had never forgotten that. Mason leaned closer. "Say something, will you?" Samira's gaze dropped to his shoes, polished, expensive, undeserved. She smiled slightly. "Tell me," she said, her voice soft as silk. "Your dad by your SAT scores too?" A collective gasp fluttered through the onlookers. The courtyard stilled. Mason's jaw locked. "Back off." It was Mr. Delaney, a young teacher walking by. His voice lacked force. He didn't step in. He didn't issue detention. He kept walking, muttering the bare minimum. As always. Mason laughed. "That's what I thought." The bullying didn't stop there. It got worse. Her locker was vandalized with milk-drenched books. She received fake texts from a boy in her chemistry class, asking her out, then laughing when she answered. She overheard slurs disguised as jokes, seen by teachers who said nothing. But she stayed calm. Still, waiting. Because Samira knew bullies always push too far eventually. That moment came on a sweltering Thursday afternoon. Most students had already left campus. The air smelled of turf and sweat, the sound of distant whistles fading as practice wrapped up. Samira was beneath the bleachers, retrieving her backpack when the shadows moved. She rose slowly. Mason stood on her right. Tanner blocked the left. There was no crowd this time. Just them. Tanner's grin was smug. "We thought we'd finish our conversation." Samira didn't answer. "You think you're better than us?" Mason's voice was low now, tainted with anger he didn't fully understand. Tanner leaned in. "Time to teach you a lesson." Mason reached for her arm. That was the mistake. In one fluid motion, Samira spun, locked his wrist, and dropped him with a swift takedown that sent his body slamming against the pavement. Tanner blinked. "What the?" He lunged. She sidestepped, clipped his knee, and redirected his momentum until he collapsed next to Mason with a groan. 7 seconds. That's all it took. Silence hung in the air. Then came the clicks of phones. Students had started recording, some from across the quad, others peeking from the stairwell. Samira stood over them, her breathing calm, her voice even. "You picked the wrong girl." Security arrived minutes later, confused by the scene. But by then, the footage was online. By midnight, it had over 500,000 views. By morning, It was national news. The headline hit every major outlet. Elite school bullies taken down by quiet black girl in stunning self-defense. Samira Holt became a name that buzzed through breakfast shows and political panels. Not because she wanted it, but because the truth had gone too long unspoken. She wasn't the first student of color at Whitmore to endure harassment, just the first to put an end to it in a way no one could ignore. That morning, Samira sat in Dean Rosalind Whitaker's office, her expression unreadable. Across from her, the dean shuffled papers and avoided eye contact. "If you had reported this earlier—" "I did," Samira interrupted, voice flat. The dean froze. At home, her father watched the footage again and again. He didn't cheer. He didn't scold. "You did what you were trained to do," he said quietly. Her mother kissed her forehead. "You stayed calm. You stayed you. That's what matters." The next day, the school didn't feel the same. News vans were parked outside the wrought iron gates. Reporters read their scripts in hushed voices. Whitmore Academy, now under scrutiny for years of racial harassment complaints, buried beneath prestige and silence. Inside the school, tension pulsed through the hallways. Whispers followed Samira wherever she walked, but now they carried a different weight. Not pity, not disdain, respect. The main office had summoned her. She entered the conference room to find the school board seated stiffly. For men in tailored suits, one woman with pearl earrings and a clipboard. At the end of the table sat Dean Whitaker, and next to her father. Holt, calm, decorated, unshaken. "Miss Holt," one board member began, "we'd like to open a dialogue about restorative practices." Roland's voice cut in, sharp as glass. "Let's be honest. You allowed 2 privileged boys to torment my daughter. The only reason we're here now is because she defended herself better than your institution ever did." Silence. Samira said nothing. She didn't need to. Outside, Mason and Tanner had been suspended indefinitely. Their parents tried to spin the story. "Our sons are not racist," their statement read. It was horseplay taken out of context. But the video showed everything. The sneers, the threat, the takedown. Social media wasn't buying the spin. Samira the Storm trended for days. Celebrities reposted the clip. A senator tweeted, "Courage doesn't always look like noise. Sometimes it's silence until it explodes into truth." Proud of you, Samira. But not all reactions were supportive. Inside the school, some resented her. She made the school look bad. They whispered. She brought race into everything. That's when someone unexpected stood up. Vivian Tran, class president. Blonde, polished, daughter of a Fortune 500 CEO. The school's golden girl. She interrupted AP government class without raising her hand. "You're all blaming Samira for making this visible," she said. But she didn't bring racism here. She just made it impossible to keep pretending it wasn't. The room went still. "If you're uncomfortable," Vivian added, "maybe ask yourselves why it took a fight for you to notice what she's been living through." Samira blinked, surprised. Vivian nodded once, then sat down. The school held an emergency assembly. All students, all faculty. Samira didn't want to speak. But that night, her dad told her something she never forgot. Leadership isn't about volume. It's about showing up even when your voice shakes. She stepped up to the mic. Her voice was low but unwavering. "For months, I was mocked, cornered, and ignored. You saw it, but most of you saw it too late. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to learn. But when no one protected me, I had to protect myself. What you saw in that video wasn't power. It was survival." The auditorium sat in stunned silence. No applause. No comments. Just wait. The kind of truth that lands and lingers. A week later, a journalist published a report. Years of internal complaints from other students of color, ignored or buried. One transfer student had documented over 30 instances of racial slurs. A Latina sophomore had left after being mocked for her accent. None of them were ever addressed. Now there were headlines. The entire board resigned. New leadership was installed. A diversity task force created. Mandatory bias training launched. The school issued a formal apology. Front page of their site. Samira didn't care. She didn't want headlines. She wanted change. And now it had begun. She walked past the same courtyard where Mason had once stood. A younger student, wide-eyed and dark-skinned, ran up beside her. "I saw the video," the girl whispered. "I'm not scared anymore." Samira smiled. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. She hadn't just endured. She created space. That night, in her bedroom, she watched the video again, not of the takedown, but of her speech. It had reached 2.3 million views. A message pinged her inbox. "Harvard Youth Leadership Conference, you've been selected." She stared at the screen, a soft smile curling at the edge of her lips. They didn't see her as a threat anymore. They finally saw her for what she'd always been, a leader. And for anyone who ever doubted her, they learned the hard way. They picked the wrong girl.